Lumos. Lumos Maxima. There it is. What is up, guys? Welcome back to Creative Readers, etc. I'm Lexi, and along with Maddie and Cassandra, this is the channel where we do creative things that sometimes involve reading, etc. Today's video, I'm very excited to be bringing you my 2020 O.W.L.s or O.W.L.s recap, which is the readathon hosted during the month of April by the channel Book Roast, and it is the predecessor to the N.E.W.T.s, which take place in August. As you might be able to tell from my Ravenclaw house representation, because on this channel with two Gryffindors, gotta represent the Ravenclaw pride. The O.W.L.s is a Harry Potter themed readathon designed after the exams taken by the students of Hogwarts. It's just a fun thing to do during this month, especially with all that's been going on. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy and reading lots of books, because that's what this is good for. I chose to follow the career path of Spellmaker, and for that I had to read 7 different books. Those prompts that I had to follow were astronomy, arithmancy, ancient runes, charms, history of magic, divination, and transfiguration. With those books, I chose to read, or prompts I should say, I chose to read Six of Crows, Othello, Legendary, Cruel Prince, Chamber of Secrets, Trials of Apollo, and Soul Chambers. These were the books and prompts that I had to fulfill to complete my O.W.L.s, which I did, and I am here to tell you my thoughts on each, since I did not vlog. However, Cassandra did vlog her O.W.L.s, and I will put a card up here so you can go watch 1 or 2 of those, and I will also link those down in the description. And Maddie is also doing a recap of the O.W.L.s because she participated as well, and that video will be going up next week, or it's already up if you're watching this in the future. Without further ado, let's get right on into it. Accio Books. Whoa, okay. Well, this worked better than I had imagined, so I'm going to set these down and we'll go through one at a time. This is the last book that I read. I don't know why I put it first. I just did it in the order of the prompts that I had written down in my bullet journal. This is, of course, Six of Crows, the collector's edition, as you can see. It's very lovely, by Leigh Bardugo. It was to fill the prompt Astronomy, which was a book that you would read mostly at night or in the dark, which I like to read under my blanket using my phone flashlight, but I did mostly read this at night as well, trying to be fulfilled to the prompt, and I finished this in 3 days. I love this book with all of my heart. It is a reread, and I haven't read it for about 2 years, so it was refreshing to read it again, especially after reading 2 books that I didn't enjoy very thoroughly. Reading something that I loved was a very nice change. I love all of the characters in this book and the way they interact with each other. Kaz is just... I love Kaz. His bromance with Jesper and his romance with N.E.W.T.s is just... I love it. I love the way Matthias and Nina develop their relationship from love to hatred back to love. It's... Jesper flirting with Wylan gives me life. Wylan in general gives me life. I love Wylan too. They're all just A+, and the plot itself, it's so funny. It's so well written. There's humor. My ghost won't associate with your ghost. Iconic. I mean, what's not to love about this book? 5 out of 5 stars. Probably will read again at some point. I love it. Also, isn't the collector's edition just gorgeous? I love it. Anywho, that does it for our first book. Our next book is, of course, Othello, Accio, Othello, which was fulfilling the prompt for arithmancy. This was written by Shakespeare, and I had to read a book that was outside of my typical genre, which I never read a play before, other than when I was actually in a play. However, it was surprisingly enjoyable. I didn't think I would actually enjoy it as much as I did, and yet I was thoroughly entertained by the story. I mean, of course it's Shakespeare, so it was kind of hard to understand, but luckily this came with translations. We were supposed to read this for a literary criticism competition. However, that got canceled thanks to you-know-who, so I just had it sitting on my bookshelf, never to be read, until I got the nerve to read it for the O.W.L.s. The nerve? The idea. That would be a better word to use. And it was surprisingly fun to read. It was depressing, and it was a little bit hard to get through, but I was entertained by the storyline. I'm not sure that I feel comfortable giving this a rating on the scale. It took me 2 days to read, and rating Shakespeare just feels weird. But I would probably give it a 4 out of 5 stars. If we're rating Shakespeare, that just feels like blasphemy. But that's what we're gonna do, and that does it for Othello and Arithmancy. Our next book is Legendary by Stephanie Garber. Accio Legendary. This is to fill the prompt Ancient Runes, which was to read a book with a heart on the cover. I know that this is technically a spade, but it looks like a heart. I'm calling it a heart, and I read it, and I loved it. I enjoyed this book very thoroughly. I love all the characters in this. I don't connect with them as much as I do the characters in Six of Crows, but it's still fun. It's a very unique book. I don't think I've ever read anything along the same lines as this, so props to Stephanie Garber for original ideas. And the chemistry between the characters is there. It's very fun to read, and there's lots of character development going on. The way Tella starts to learn how to trust other people and maybe fall in love? Who knows? It's very entertaining, and I would probably give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, maybe 4. One of the two, but it's definitely up there, and I would recommend this book. And that does it for Legendary. Next up, we are moving on down the list to Charms, and that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Accio, Cruel Prince. This, as I said, was to fill the prompt Charms, which was Lumos, or read a book with a white cover. This is the only book that I have with a white cover. However, I probably still would have picked it up even if it wasn't the only book that I had with a white cover, because this was also a reread, and the first time that I read it, I didn't finish it. So I wanted to give it another shot and see if finishing it made me enjoy it more. Spoiler alert, it did not. This took me 2 days to read, similar to all of the ones before it, and that was mostly because I wanted to get through it and be done with it and never look at it ever again. I mean, the cover is gorgeous. I love it. Props to whoever designed this cover. A+. But I'm not going to read the rest of the series. I might purchase them just for aesthetic value, but I don't plan on opening them and reading them. The plot of this book was okay. It was a semi-entertaining plot. But the way it was written made it feel cliche. I didn't love any of the characters. I didn't connect with them at all. I didn't feel the need to keep reading this or find out what happens next. Even at the parts where there was something going on that you wanted to know, you were supposed to want to know what happens next, I didn't. I just wanted to be done with this book. And thank God, when I finished it. I'm sure Holly Black is a wonderful author, but the way this was written just made me not like it at all. If this plot had been written by a different author, like Leigh Bardugo or Rick Riordan, I might have enjoyed it more, but just the way it was written didn't cut it for me. So I would maybe give this a 2 stars, and that's being generous. So... But I finished it, and so I got my prompt for that completed at least. And I mean, I'm glad I finished it in the end, because having something that I don't finish makes me feel weird. So now I have the closure, at least, that I know I don't like it for certain. That is all for this book, and we will continue moving down our list to our next book. Our next book being Trials of Apollo, Book 1, The Hidden Oracle. Accio, Trials of Apollo. This book is, of course, by Rick Riordan. It is the first book in the Trials of Apollo series, and it was to fulfill the prompt divination, which was to read a book on your TBR based on a random number generator. So I assigned a number to each book in my TBR, plugged that into my Alexa, and told her to give me a random number, and it picked this one, which is okay because I tried to read this about 3 times before I actually sat down and finished it. And it's not because it's a bad book, it's just because it starts slow. And that's okay, some books do start slow. After I got into the book, it picked up, and it was, of course, the Rick Riordan we all know and love. And I did enjoy this book. The characters are very lovable, very funny, there's lots of humor, good plot lines, and it was an easy read. It was fun and lighthearted. And I did read this after a Fellow, I believe. So it was a fun, lighthearted read to have after that. I would probably give this a 4 out of 5 stars. Just because it started out very slow. So it was kind of hard to initially get into. But once I did, it was just non-stop. I loved it. I would recommend this series to people who are looking to read a fun book. And that is all for this. So once again, continuing down our list. Our next book is, of course, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Accio, Harry Potter. This was to fulfill the prompt History of Magic, which was to read a book that features witches and wizards. Since we are in the midst of the Owls, which is of course a Harry Potter themed readathon, I figured it would be a wonderful time to read, of course, the one and only Harry Potter. And since I am currently in the middle of a reread of the Harry Potter, as it's been several years since I've actually read the books, this was the one that I was on, so I chose to pick up this one. It was probably the easiest choice out of all of them when creating my TBR, so that was fun. And of course I loved it. I loved rereading it and getting to see Sassy Harry and all of the characters. It's of course a 5-star read, and I would recommend this series to anybody, but most people have already read it, so I did enjoy this thoroughly, and I read it in about 2 days. And that is all for this one. Our final book, last but maybe least, is Soul Chambers, Life is in the Blood. Accio, Soul Chambers. This is written by Paul Vander and Dominic Dames, and it was to fulfill the prompt Transfiguration, which was to read a book that features some kind of transfiguration in the book. And in this book, 2 of the main characters transform into vampires. It's not your typical vampire book, I promise. It's a very good book. I picked this up at a Comic-Con a few years back, and the authors were very nice men. This was also a reread. I would say that it was hard to read. It was probably the hardest book out of this whole to-be-read list to get through, But that's not because it's a bad book. It's just these are indie authors, and I think this was their first book, and they might need to do better research on their editors because there were so many grammatical errors, and just the way it was written sometimes made me had to go back and be like, huh? What does that say? But as for the actual plot itself and the characters, all very well done. I really love some of the characters in this book and the chemistry between them. The storyline is actually thoroughly interesting. It's about time-traveling vampires, funnily enough. That's not really what it's about, but that's kind of what it's about, summed up very badly. And, you know, I might recommend this book to people if they can get over the way it's written. It just kind of made it hard for me to look at it for more than 10 minutes because my brain kept trying to rewrite the sentences that were bad, and instead of actually reading. I would probably give this book 3 stars because it's still better than Cruel Prince. But it did take me about like 2 weeks to read, so not sure about that, but I read it, and with that I completed my TBR for the O.W.L.s Readathon 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Throughout this readathon, I read a total of 2,594 pages, which is a lot of pages. 7 books worth, apparently. I had a lot of fun doing this readathon, and I would recommend anybody who has the free time to do it. There are a lot of other careers that don't require you to read 7 books, and there are careers that require you to read more than 7 books, if that's what suits your fancy. And of course, it's over for this month since it's April, but you can still look back on the prompts and try for yourself to catch up for the N.E.W.T.s, or you can start with the N.E.W.T.s, or you can just read books for fun, because that's what reading is all about. I did enjoy this, and I enjoyed getting to chat with Maddie and Cassandra about their progress throughout the readathon and watching Cassandra's vlogs, as well as some other people partaking in them. It was just a fun way to spread the love of books, and with that, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching my recap and final thoughts of the 2020 O.W.L.s Readathon. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see more bookish, creative, and etc. content. I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye. N.E.W.T.s.